Michael Wenglein trained as an automotive engineer before founding and working in a series of software companies. He's now CEO of a Proptech company and a seed investor in other startups. Welcome to Alumni Experience, Michael. You've seen a lot of software companies. How do you tell if you've got a good idea?
Checklist number one is basically, can you explain what you're doing? And you get, I always tend to say, if you can explain it at a barbecue on Sunday afternoon and people catch on to it and they go, wow, that's great. Why isn't there a product like that? I would use that. Or in a business sense, someone saying, that's awesome, once you have the product, please come, I want to try it out with my company, or whatever, these kind of reactions. So that's number one, above all else, because you need to create value in order to capture part of that and make a successful business. Number two is, can you live with uncertainty and setbacks? Because starting a company from scratch is really tough for someone who comes from a very cozy corporate environment. Even if you do long hours in a corporate, everything is safe, you get your salary, you might wonder about your bonus and whether you make that or not, or how much of that, but there's really no substantial risk of failing in the sense that as an entrepreneur sometimes, well, I think not even sometimes, the rule in the beginning, in a very early phase, is you don't know where you'll be in 2 months and whether you still have the company or not, or whether it's working, whether you get that financing or not, and it stops, right? So can you somehow, are you convinced enough of what you're doing to go through that phase?
What about funding? Is it easy now to access funding?
There's not really a bad time to start a business in that segment, high-tech, IT, software. There hasn't been a bad time in the past 2-3 decades, really. People who think about this in a more seasonal way and say, is it the right timing and so on, maybe rethink your idea, because if your idea is good, if your product is good and it creates value, there's no bad time really for anything. I think that goes for other sectors as well. But I think access to capital was never easier than now. There's so much liquidity in the market for early stage investments and growth investments. There's never been more liquidity for exits. It's really easy to sell all sizes of companies these days if the company is any good.
What do you think is going to be the next big thing in software and technology? Is it artificial intelligence?
I would say artificial intelligence is a very difficult term. I think it's often misinterpreted, at least at the current stage. There will be something like real intelligence, or what we describe as or understand as intelligent, sometime in the future. Nobody knows how long that will take, but estimates are varying wildly all over the place. I think what's very relevant now is the capability of software algorithms to make very precise predictions. That is the big first wave of innovation, and that's already happening for a while now. So there's a very good book. Anyone who's interested should read Prediction Machines. It's a book that explains from an economist perspective what this whole AI trend is about, and basically what they're saying is the cost of making very good and reliable predictions is coming down to almost negligible cost. So anything that relies on predictions can be done a lot cheaper and without humans. Like, for example, in law firms, a friend of mine is a partner in a big law firm. They're testing machine learning based tools to analyze contracts and weaknesses in contracts, in legal contracts. And basically, their first results are showing that 70% to 80% of the work in doing that is going away. That means for a law firm with 1,000 lawyers, junior and more senior lawyers, most of the more junior work is just disappearing. It's just gone. So that's going to change deeply a lot of industries.
How easy is it, do you think, to move between the corporate world and the kind of startup entrepreneurial world?
I started entrepreneur I did entrepreneur again. Then I tried corporate for the first time, it was a complete shock for me. It was probably the opposite that happens to someone coming from corporate to entrepreneur, because I never realized how much friction there is in a large organization, how much you have to, how long it would take for easy things to get done, to convince the right people, go through the ranks until you get the funding, for example, that you need, etc.
You recently sold Property Base, your latest company. How did that go?
We basically sold Property Base into a roll-up, into a consolidation play, where a very cool company from the US who have been very successful at building these kind of roll-ups has purchased Property Base along with some very good complementary products.
What did you learn from that process?
One important thing I think is that buyers on the other side are rarely shopping for a very specific thing. They don't have this idea in mind that they need exactly this and that's the only way to do a transaction. It's a dialogue. It's not a one-way road. It's not like we're advertising ourselves, we're for sale, and then you wait for the exact right buyer that looks for exactly that. That's probably not going to happen. Maybe another tip, it's for later on, not the checklist for starting a company, but the checklist for selling a company, is don't get obsessed with valuation. If you have a good deal, do it, move on, do your next company, because it gets easier once you've sold one or two and made some good exits. A lot of people, I think, they overstretch at the last moment, and then there might be a next 2008 crisis, and they might not be able to sell at all their business. If it's like we're talking mid-sized, nicely growing businesses, but yeah, these days things have gone a bit crazy on the price side, so that's a challenge to get realistic about value.